Welcome everybody tonight. Chicago SABR is pleased to present Sharon Pannozzo for a Zoom session. If you don't know Sharon, she worked for the Cubs for, was it 20 plus years?
24.
24 years, starting as the assistant um, media relations position and eventually making yourself into the director of public relations, correct?
Correct.
Okay, perfect. All right. So if you've never participated in one of these before, what we'd like to do is a little bit of a presentation that involves kind of this is your life. I don't know how much of it you will have to remember, but hopefully some of this will seem familiar to you as we go through it. So if at any point you want to hop in, you've got a story, or you want to say something about something that we haven't asked you about, that'd be great. And then hopefully there'll be some time at the end for you to answer questions that anybody might have. Does that sound good?
Absolutely. Sure thing.
Okay,
Yep.
perfect.
This is your life.
Okay, so early days, we'll just kind of start maybe from college age or so, or maybe why don't we go back a little bit further? You grew up in, is it Lee, Massachusetts?
I grew up in Western Massachusetts. Uh, some people refer it's beautiful country, the Berkshires, small town, goats across the street. Beautiful place to grow up.
And as a child, Red Sox fan then, where you're at?
Oh yeah, definitely a Red Sox fan, but Western Massachusetts, I mean, we're very close to New York border. So, in that geographic area, you're picking up the Yankees for sure on TV and sometimes also the Mets. So, in addition to Boston sports, you're getting exposure to the New York sports as well. But funny story, one of our neighbors Pittsfield which is nearly had a minor league team for years, and I think they still do. And our neighbor used to house some of the players. And one of the most interesting players they had was Bill Lee, the spaceman. So he was a character, even as a neighbor. And I forgot how old I was, maybe 10, 12, but having exposure to a character like him in baseball was kind of part of my initiation into loving the game.
So who were your favorite players growing up then?
I guess I really didn't have favorites. Uh, Carl Yastrzemski, Ted Williams. I was an intern for the Red Sox actually for let's see, about 6 months. So it was like my last semester of college, UMass, and it was just an incredible experience. The Yawkey family still owned the team at the time, so it still had that family run feel. And it was the woman on the telephone. I mean, we had the old-fashioned telephone board still, and the woman that was the phone operator had been there for like 60 years or something. It was just a really special experience and special place. And actually, I met Tom Scher, who went on to be a very well-known broadcaster. He actually at the time was working for a local radio station, and he was, still in his early 20s at the time. And actually made a lifelong friend of Tom Scher when I was doing my internship. But I got exposure to people like Jim Rice, Dwight Evans, just really special guys, and it was a wonderful experience.
Nice. So we are able to find, all kinds of little clips on newspapers.com. And this one came up from 1982. It looks like it was right about the time that you were graduating from college. And it's got some stuff in here. It looks like you were kind of a go-getter from the start. You got your degree in sports management in 1982. You
Yep.
were the public relations director for the yearbook at the school, program coordinator for the marketing club. And
I
my favorite is
was
you were on the rugby team. Is that
on
true?
the rugby team.
I don't know the first thing about rugby, but I know that it looks like it's a lot of fun. You just run around and bash each other and throw a ball around. I don't know. How'd you get into rugby?
Well, it was actually a sport, like a regular sport, and we had a combined team with all of the other Amherst area colleges, and we played in a league with the Ivy League schools. So uh, in the UMass Amherst area, there's Smith College, Amherst College, Hampshire College. Um, what else is there? I can't remember them all, but so we had a combined women's rugby team, and we competed in this league with all of the Ivy League schools. So it was pretty fun. And, back then, very few people knew about rugby and what a scrum was. And, I always like to joke. On that team, I was like the fastest person. So we had uh, well, we had some size. So so that was a great experience. And somewhere I think I still have my rugby uniform. I don't know why I kept it. I'm sure I have no shot at getting into it, but it's just a great memory, and it was fun watching the rugby um, matches at the Olympics. That was really cool because the team, obviously, very good team, the women's team, and also seeing how that sport has grown over the years is pretty cool. But it's a fun sport. It's a brutal sport, but I enjoyed playing, and that's one of the things on this this newspaper clipping I remember.
Yeah. And so part of what the clipping indicates is that you were the administrative assistant for the GM for is it Hollyoak Millers?
Holyoke, Holyoke. It's
Holyoke,
a
sorry.
Yep, it's a little town in Western Massachusetts.
And just looking at the photographs of that ballpark, Mackenzie Field, it still stands, or Mackenzie Stadium. It looks like there's not even stands behind home plate, and this is kind of how it looks now. Is that how it was when you were there?
I honestly don't remember. I will say this. Um, Technically, I was the assistant GM. Um, and back then, it was, before the MLB app and all the technology, and, you still took in cash at the gate. My game day duties were, like doing hot dog inventory, supervising the concessions. At the end of the night, I counted the gate. Um, it was a great experience. I have so much respect for people who work in the minor leagues. It's a tough job, and you know, thinking up creative promotions to get people to come out and support the team. Tom was a great guy to work for. He made a lot of connections for me, and I actually ran into him at a winter meetings when I was actually the director of PR for the Cubs. So that was kind of cool because you always want to look back and thank the people that helped you to get where you are. And he's a guy who really did help me. And it was a fun summer. It was a summer job basically.
And so that's not too far from Amherst, right? So right down the street or right
Right.
down the road.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And in terms of wanting to do sports management for a job, was your initial intention to get into baseball, or were you kind of keeping your options open regardless of what the opportunity was?
Honestly, I'm a huge football fan, and talking about location of Western Massachusetts and the New York teams, I was a big Buffalo Bills fan. Loved the Buffalo Bills, and my dad would take me up to Buffalo, which was like a 5-hour drive to go to games, and so I really wanted to work in PR and football. And my senior year, it was required as part of the program to graduate, and I had um, been offered an internship, a summer internship for training camp with the Buffalo Bills. And I was just, this was it. I got what I wanted. And About a week before I was supposed to start, can't recall the exact timing, but I get a phone call because there was no email back then, and you didn't have cell phones, so I just got a phone call on a landline from somebody at the Buffalo Bills who said they had to unfortunately rescind the offer because I was going to have to. There was two interns. The other intern was a male, and we were going to have to share a dorm room at the college where they did training camp. So that was kind of like my first experience at a little discrimination. But you look back and you're the events in your life put you on a path to where you're supposed to be. And so is the big word pivot. Even before that was popular, I had to pivot. And I had worked in the sports information office. All 4 years I was in college and was very close to the sports information director. And he had a friend with the Boston Red Sox named Dick Bresciani, who was the head of PR. And he called Dick and said, Sharon, the hard worker, she needs an internship. It told him what happened with the Buffalo Bills. I drove down to Boston, interviewed with Dick Bresciani, and I became the Boston Red Sox's first ever intern.
First
So
ever.
first ever. And then that put me on the path to have a wonderful career in baseball. So I thank the Buffalo Bills for, telling me to find something else.
So when you get to Fenway Park, some place that you visited throughout your baseball fandom, how does it feel to actually walk in there and be like, holy cow, I work here?
Well, it's first of all, just like, Wrigley Field, Fenway Park is a very special place. And it was 1982, January. I was there from January to May of 82. They hadn't, the park was still pretty pristine, hadn't undergone a lot of the renovations that have happened in subsequent years. So, and Ted Williams was still there, and Mrs. Yockey still ran the park, and she was still around. So it was still like just sort of so old school. And so to be able to walk on that building and go on the field. Actually, I think it was Tom sent me a video of me standing on the field recently. And I just looked at myself going, wow, like if I only knew then, like what an amazing experience I would have in baseball. I mean, I was just kind of this young person just in awe, just total awe of the green wall and the whole experience of being in that park. And the people were very special. It was a vocation for most of the people that worked in that park. It wasn't a job. It was their life. So, to be part of that for 6 months was amazing. And then fortunately for me, I was able to leverage that to the Cub job. Plus, they didn't offer me a job, to be honest. But ironically, a few years later, my sister, I helped her get an internship there because I'd stayed close to everybody. And so my sister, Susan, went and did an internship with the Red Sox, and they offered her a job. So she worked there for many years and had a career in baseball as well.
So what is your job responsibility as the very first intern ever hired by the Red Sox? What are you doing day to day?
Oh, day to day. I did a lot of the fan mail. I responded to bags of fan mail, and I don't want to ruin it for anybody, but there's a lot of people out there from 1982 who probably have a good forgery by me on their photo cards that they got from the Red Sox. And I did a pretty good Carl Yastrzemski forgery, I must say. So I did a lot of that. There was back then, you still had everything, there wasn't the digital revolution. You still like typed up press notes. And so I did a lot of administrative work, and they offered me a lot of opportunities, though. I got to, do things on the field, and help with the media guide production, doing the bios, and, it's just a lot of general, project type things.
And so when you get a job with the Cubs, they actually have in the paper transactions, and it says, right, named Sharon Pannozzo of Lee as the public relations assistant. And I keep pressing the wrong button here, sorry, but how
That's
cool
okay.
is it to be in the paper with a major league transaction?
Well, that was back in the day where they actually did front office transactions in that section. So that was obviously, that's pretty cool to see your name and Chicago NL, and to be in the newspaper like that. But yeah, I'd like to know where you found all this stuff, John.
It's SABR, we have our ways.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what was the hiring process like? How did you apply to the Cubs, or how does that work?
Well, I had been, you know, kind of looking around for a baseball job, and just kind of randomly, and I was living in Massachusetts at the time. Um, a person that I went to UMass with, who was an exchange student from the University of Oregon, randomly, was now living in Chicago, and we had remained friends. And she called me up. She told me that she knew I was looking for a job, and she said there was just a big story in the newspaper about Black Monday. And I don't know if any of you old Cub folks here remember that, but when the Tribune Company took over after it was sold from the Wrigley family, they basically kept all the employees for a period of a year. And after that 1 year, I think it was a day after the last day of the season, they fired half, 2/3 of the front office. And so my friend called me up and said, there might be a job for you. So the Red Sox connected me with Bob Iback, and I called Bob, who at the time was the PR director. Bob had been brought over by Dallas Green from Philly. And I talked to Bob, and Bob basically said, we've interviewed a number of people. We were only allowed to fly one person in for an interview. We already flew that person in. We'd love to see you, but we need to make a decision. And so within 24 hours, I got on a Greyhound bus, and I took the bus to Chicago, and I went in like I never slept. I went into Wrigley Field. I interviewed with Bob Iback, Ned Coletti, who's the number 2 person. Randomly, Barney Sterling, who was a longtime Cub photographer, was there that day. I interviewed with him. They took me to lunch. Then I spent like the whole day there. It was a Friday. And at the end of the day, I basically, and I was supposed to take the bus back on Sunday. And I basically told Bob that if he wanted to hire me, he needed to tell me the next day. Otherwise, I was going to get on the bus and not come back. And it wasn't that I was like giving an ultimatum, but I was so exhausted from not sleeping and interviewing all day. I just needed to tell him, like, this is the reality of it. If I get on that bus on Sunday, I'm not going to come back. And also, I come from a very close Italian family, and I'm like the oldest of 6. And I don't think my dad would have let me come back. So Bob called me that Saturday morning, offered me the job, and I started the job on Monday. And I borrowed some clothes from my friend who lived in Chicago at the time, who had told me about Black Monday. So I stayed an entire week, worked, took the bus back, got my car, packed it up, and then went back to Chicago. I really
Did you
wanted
have,
that job.
did you have opportunities with any other clubs that didn't pan out, or was the Cubs you got there and you got hired? How did that work?
Uh, to be honest, I think anybody who's ever tried to get a job in sports knows it's not easy. It doesn't matter, whether you're male or female anymore. So many people want these jobs. Um, they're hard to get. You can have all the great experience in the world and they're still difficult to get. So back then, there were no women. And, except for in administrative, back then they called them secretarial type jobs. And there just weren't a lot of opportunities. I mean, I was in the first class, I was part of the first sport management class at UMass, and UMass is one of the first schools to have a sport management class. So there weren't a lot of people that had the background for sport management at the time, and I was also one of the few females there as well. So I feel very fortunate that I even had the opportunity. And I consider Bob and Ned to be very forward thinking, because part of my job was supposed to be administrative, and I'm not a very good typist, although I am now. But with part of my job was supposed to be administrative, but they were also giving me all this other responsibility as an assistant. So they were making the job bigger for me. So I have a lot of gratitude to both Bob and Ned for obviously giving me a chance, and also opening the doors for women in general, because there just weren't any back then.
And so what kind of things are you doing when it's 1982 into 1983, getting prepared for the next season? What's your job looking like?
Oh, media guide, putting, if anybody's ever seen one of those media guides, they are a beast. And back then, you didn't have computers and technology that we have now, and it was all done on typewriters, and you needed whiteout, and oh my Lord, doing all those bios and the statistics. So that was a big part of what the off season looked like. And then we did these I think they were called like stove type banquet things that we would go to, and we would bring players, and it was sort of the precursor of what actually one of the things that I developed, which is the whole Cub Caravan concept. But yeah, so and just getting ready for the season and getting people ready for spring training. I didn't get to go to spring training my first year, but I got to go to spring training starting in 84. And then obviously, from there on out, and 84 was obviously a great year. So, yeah, so.
Yeah, 84 was a fun year. I remember Bob Dernier saying that it was the best summer of his life. For me, at that point, as a 12-year-old in Chicago, I was the best summer of my life as well. How was it being with the club in such an exciting year?
Well, the interesting thing is, I joined in November of 82, and talking about the history, the Cubs not doing well, years of losing. So to walk in and then a year later, basically you're going to the playoffs. I mean, it was amazing. I didn't realize that there would be so many other big periods of time when we didn't go. I got spoiled because I started at the end of 82, and already by 84 we were going to the playoffs. So that's kind of, I was thinking, oh, this is great. This is going to be, this is going to be fun. And then, there was a lot of the years where we lost a lot. So
Yeah, and it looks like, unfortunately, for anybody that doesn't remember, the Cubs did not make the World Series. So part of your job apparently was telling everybody how to get refunds on their World Series tickets and going to a Tolman Home Savings and Loan to do it. I mean, this just seems so ancient at this point, but
it
I guess that
really is. Yeah.
probably wasn't the funnest part of your job that year, right?
Oh, that was, as anybody who was there for 84, that was just a very, very disappointing year. And, but it was special. It was a very special year. There had been a big drought before going to the playoffs that year. And it was a great team. It was a really good group of guys. Um, and, it was disappointing not to go to the World Series. I mean, I remember, you know, we had poster boards where we were doing World Series seating charts for the press tickets and the press box. And then, all these seating areas were going to be auxiliary press areas. And, we were just using I mean, nowadays you can do all this on a computer and create graphics. And, this was definitely old school. We were like drawing on poster board.
Yeah, and so in that same year too, it looks like you had some issues originally with, oops, again, I did it. I'm sorry. Trying to move this around. Had some issues with Don Zimmer right out of the box, huh? So you're facing some challenges you already talked about, discrimination challenges, and it's even going as high as the manager and coaches.
Yeah, there was some, this is how I like to look at it. Baseball people really weren't used to seeing women in these types of jobs, and they weren't used to seeing women doing, traditionally what they had, that men would do. So, I give them all some grace, but at the same token, it was challenging. Don, definitely old school, definitely old school. And he didn't want me on the team bus, and I was allowed to travel with the team. So that, once again, I applaud Bob and Ned for, you know, allowing me that opportunity. And, I felt that it was kind of my duty to try to make it work within the sort of the parameters that were there, and without rocking the boat too much. So I didn't really complain to too many people, because actually there wasn't anybody to complain to. So, taking the team bus back and forth to the ballpark and taking the team bus back and forth, to the airport. Don did not want me on the bus. And, to him, it was because he felt that he didn't want a woman to hear, foul language that was spoken on the bus and such things. And so he, basically kicked me off the bus. And the traveling secretary had to find a way to accommodate me. So, usually I would take taxis back and forth to the ballpark. And mostly I was able to sort of take taxis to the airport. The taxi would follow the bus because, as most of they're all charters. So you go to a charter area, you just can't can't get into the charter areas with a regular taxi. So John Cox was the traveling secretary at the time, and poor John had to like hire a taxi. I literally was like behind the bus in a taxi to go back and forth to the airport. And so that went on for I don't know how long. And then randomly something happened where we couldn't get a taxi. I think we may have been in Montreal. And, there was delays and such things. And they had no choice but to let me on the bus. And so they just told me to stay quiet and sit in the front row. And ironically, after that, I just did the same thing, and I didn't take a taxi again. I was allowed to be on the bus. So it was just, going along to get along and not rocking the boat. That was my philosophy, and it worked for me. There were other people who were trying to make um, their way as females traveling with the team. And, they ran into some issues as well. And they handled it differently. And I don't think they were as successful as I was. Um, other people said you should, fight it and go to the National Organization for Women and all of this. And I just said, I'm just going to continue to do what I'm doing, and they'll get used to me. So I stayed for 24 years. So clearly they got used to me.
Did the relationship with Don Zimmer improve at any point?
Oh my Lord, yes. I mean, at one point, he and his lovely wife were almost like a father figure. I mean, he would give me gift certificates, tell me to go buy new shoes. He and his wife, I forgot her first name, but lovely people. Again, they're just not used to seeing different, aspects and with women doing things. And once he got used to it and understood I was there to do my job, and that I could handle some foul language and that I could stand up for myself, he he accepted that this was what it was. And I do recall overhearing him at a winter meetings that I went to him, where he was telling another manager uh, and pointed to me and goes, they were talking about something, and he just goes, "Oh, well, look at my PR guy." And it was just kind of humorous, he's like, he was proud. He was proud because I did a good job for him. He's just, he was really, he was a special guy.
And how about Dallas Green? How did he treat you?
Dallas was awesome. Dallas was awesome. I loved working with Dallas. He was larger than life, great baseball guy. Everybody who worked for him loved Dallas. And I was in my 20s then and living in Chicago. And, in addition to working many hours at the ballpark, I like to go out and try Rush Street and things like that. And one day he said to me, Sharon, you're looking like you're burning both ends of the candle. So, you know, probably nowadays an employer would send you to HR. But uh, Dallas was a special guy. He and his wife Sylvia. I mean, they created a family. So when he was the GM in the 80s, it really was a family atmosphere in that front office. It really was. It was a nice place to work.
Yeah, so in the middle of June in '86, Dallas, I I don't know if it was out of the blue, but fires Jim Fry and Don Zimmer. And so team spokeswoman Sharon Pannozzo says the Cubs have released Jim Fry and Don Zimmer. They were let go. That was really it. Was there more to a press release than that, or was that all that was said?
Yeah, I think that was, back then you didn't send out press releases like you do now for, when you fire people. You just fired them and just, you know, uh, made an announcement. It was sort of a different strategy back then. Plus, Dallas was pretty much a man of few words when it came to things like that. So that was it. That was just sort of it in a nutshell.
And so then in December, or actually late November 1990, Um, the Cubs signed Paul Ostenmacher to a one-year deal, and if you read down, also it looks like Ned Coletti was promoted to a position, and you took over as the head of the department. How do your duties change at this point, if at all?
Well, Ned had already been doing a lot with baseball ops at that time. The whole analytics had sort of started, and you know, scouting and all of that had really started to change. And Ned was sort of on the forefront of all of that. And so he had already been doing a lot of that with Dallas and at the time. So I had already sort of started assuming a lot of his responsibilities, traveling with the team full time mostly. Um, so it didn't at the time change a lot. I was just given the title because I was really doing the job for quite a while. Whereas Ned, again, was already like an assistant GM at that point, but he was still trying to do, he still had the media relations director uh, title. So, and at that point, Bob Ibach was still with the organization, and they're really growing the whole publications aspect of the business operation. And so Bob had moved over prior to that and was running the publications department. So they were doing Vineline. If anybody who recalls Vineline, which was a beautiful publication, Bob did that. And they were doing some coffee table type books. So Bob had already moved over to do that. And then Ned was running the department. And then Ned started to move into the baseball ops area. So I kind of was doing the job for a while anyway.
And if my math is correct, it looks like you were also doing your MBA at this whole time too. Is that right?
Yes, I had just finished my MBA at Kellogg at Northwestern, shortly before they offered to promote me. I actually was thinking of leaving. I was going to go work for Kellogg and be a Kellogg, the cereal, not Kellogg, the school, Kellogg, the cereal, to be a product manager. That's where I was kind of heading. And then when they officially, offered to give me the director role, which I was already doing, I declined to go and make more money as a product manager and stay in baseball. I mean, by that time, once you are sort of in baseball, and it's hard to leave. So I was fortunate that I got the promotion, and it's nice to still have that MBA, but I never really used it in any real fashion.
Pretty impressive to do that though while you're working and traveling. I would expect as the media relations director or as an assistant, you're not really working 9 to 5 hours either, right?
No, it was pretty tough, but I will say this, I had a lot of really, I had a lot of professors who were Cub fans, so they worked with me.
Nice.
Yeah.
So kind of as the PR director, you're wearing a lot of hats. I found a wide range of topics that you had to deal with. At some point, apparently, a commissioner wanted to move the Cubs from the National League East to the National League West. So the Cubs went and got an injunction. So you had to talk about that. And then there was a big Beanie Baby giveaway that just people were buying 20 tickets and trying to get all the Beanie Babies. And then there's another issue where somebody threw their cell phone onto the field and hit Sean Burrows from the Padres. So you're
Oh,
just dealing with all kinds of stuff, right? Where you're having to issue statements or deal with these kinds of things. What other things are you doing? Your transactions, you said the media guide, you're having to do announcements with health issues. I saw like Ron Santo had a heart attack or when Harry Carey died, things like that.
well, this is crisis management even before, there was crisis management. But, I mean, the media relation director role at the time was really, now you would call it, you're in charge of corporate communications, you're in charge of media relations, you're in charge of community relations, of, events. I mean, it all went into this one bucket. So you really had many hats. Obviously it's great experience because you are dealing with so many different aspects that, it was, I mean, I don't remember any of these, to be honest. Remember any of them, because there was something happening. One of the wonderful things about working in baseball is just like no game is the same. It's like every day is different. And so it made for an interesting work experience. Every day was different. The game is going to have a different outcome, and your work experience that day is going to be different. So, and a lot of it is servicing the media. And, there were a lot of, back then, there were a lot of people who covered the game on a regular basis that came to the ballpark and filled that press box. And, there's a lot of things changed over the course of 24 years being there.
So a little bird told me to ask you about a specific person. And it seemed like some of the stuff that I had read indicated that he kind of grew in terms of being opening himself up to interviews and so forth, and that you may have played a role in that. Is that true?
Oh, are we looking at Sammy right now?
Tammy, yeah.
Yeah, well, when Sammy came over from the White Sox, um, which at the time I told Larry Himes was the best trade he ever made. And it had nothing to do with Sammy Sosa. I just did not like George Bell. And I was happy to get George Bell out of the clubhouse because he was difficult and not a good team player. Sammy was a 30-30 guy, and he hadn't developed kind of a personality that he did over the course of the next 10 years or however long it was. But I spent a lot of time with Sammy once 1998 happened. And working with him from a PR perspective, we had a partnership, and we worked very well together. And I think Sammy did a lot for the game. People recall that 1994 was pretty rough. And after things got settled, there was still a lot of anger. Fans were still angry. They were angry at the players. They were angry at the ownership. So, things were kind of lean there. And then, 1998 came along, and there's this great opportunity to really, really capitalize on this, competition between Sammy and Mark. And, how do you leverage that? And it really helped the game. I mean, the game needed something like that at the time, and it really brought the game back. People who didn't even watch baseball in general knew who Sammy and Mark were, and were engaged in this race for the record.
And so at some point during the race for the record, did you have to field a phone call from President Bill Clinton who wanted to talk to Sammy? Do you remember that?
I do. And I think I was in San Diego, and he tied it. And I also got a few other phone calls from notable people that day. And I did, Sammy was superstitious, and he had a certain routine that he followed on game days. And I knew to respect that. And when the president called and asked to be connected to his room, I had to decline. And I thought about it really hard, but I wasn't going to disturb him. And I explained, I thought very nicely, that I didn't want to wake him up and disturb his process. And after, I think it was 12:30, I reached Sammy, and I said, I just have to tell you, these are some of the people that have called this morning that have wanted to talk to you. And, when I told him that Clinton called, I said, I'm really sorry if you really wanted to talk to him. And he was funny at the time. He was making a joke, and he said, well, technically he's your president, not mine, so it's okay. So I was like, thank you. I was a little concerned, but part of a PR person's job is to protect your client. And so that's what I was doing. It's also weird to say no to the president.
Yeah, I would expect so.
Yeah.
Are you at
But
liberty to divulge some of the other people that asked you to talk to Sammy?
What's that? I'm sorry.
I think we were talking over each other. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I just wanted to say that President Clinton came to the ballpark to see him like a few weeks later. And his press secretary, he was dealing with Mark McGuire at the time for the visit and all that. Mark was our business operations guy at the time. And Mark called me, and he goes, I don't really understand this, but his team, the president's team, has requested that the president would like to meet you. And I was like, oh, okay. And he's like, why would that be, Sharon? And I said, oh, probably because he wants to meet the person who told him that he couldn't talk to Sammy. But he was lovely to me. I got a great photo with him, and we got a good laugh out of it. So, yeah.
That's good stuff.
Yeah.
So are you at liberty to divulge any of the other people that wanted to talk to Sammy that day, but were unable to?
Elizabeth Dole called that morning. At the time, she was running the American Red Cross. Right now I can't think of who else, but he got a number of phone calls that morning from important people.
Okay, and that same little bird said that I should ask you if you had a story about Sammy Sosa the night that the corked bat incident occurred.
Uh, yeah, but that's one I'm gonna keep to myself.
Fair enough. Okay. Okay, so it looks like at some point you had your own injury. Looked the Cubs clinched the wild card berth in 1998, winning game 163 against the Giants at Wrigley Field, and you broke your toe in the celebration. You remember anything about this?
Actually, I was over by Sammy, and people are jumping up and down. And I will say, I can say Sammy broke my toe. So he was still wearing his cleats, and I would, I had it on, and this is like I had an open-toed shoe on. So that was on me. But it's a great story because I broke my toe during the championship, and Sammy broke my toe.
So it looks like at some point you're out at 3 o'clock in the morning in Montreal, grabbed a greasy hamburger at some restaurant, Harvey's establishment, and then the place burned down a few hours later. Does this ring any bells with you?
Well, yes. And I don't recall this ever being publicized. uh, Montreal, it's just a wonderful city. It's sad that there's no baseball team there any longer. It was just an interesting place to go. And yeah, it did. It burned down around me, basically. So yeah, this might go back to where Dallas was saying Sharon was burning the candle at both ends. Uh, did we freeze up?
I can hear you. Let's see.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yep. Can't hear John though.
Okay. Yeah, I think I lost John.
Hey, quick question while we're waiting for him to come back. Go back to your rookie year in '83. Were you involved with any of the Elite Elia famous Friday comments to the sports guys?
No, that happened in the clubhouse. So I was not allowed in the clubhouse at that point.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. But that was an interesting tape. And well, Les Grobstein, God bless his soul,
Yep.
will live in infamy for that tape because he's the only one that had it.
Now, a bit of history to say the least.
Yep.
And John just said that his computer accidentally shut down, so he's restarting. So he'll be back in a minute.
Okay.
So I guess I'll jump in and ask you a question really quickly, though.
Sure.
When you were obviously a baseball fan growing up, and then once you start to work for a team, specifically a baseball team, does it have any impact on your fandom, like how you enjoy the game, the specific teams?
Not really. I mean, obviously everybody has probably heard the rule, you can't cheer in the press box. So you learn to sort of control your emotions, even though you're excited or you want to clap or you're happy something good is happening. But no, I think the one thing that it did though, because I really wasn't a big statistics person, right? I knew basic. that you do, I was the official scorekeeper. And so, there are scorebooks somewhere at Wrigley Field that, have my handwriting in them, which is kind of cool because that's part of history, right? But no, it never detracted from that, if you love the game, you love the game, right? And it just, in a sense, is you learn more and you have a greater respect for it, I guess.
Sure. And we're still waiting for John, so I'll just jump into the chat. I know some people have been asking some questions, so we can open that up. Should Sammy Sosa be in the Hall of Fame?
Without a doubt. Without a doubt. What he did in 1998 for the game of baseball alone, he belongs in the Hall of Fame. And then you just look at his numbers. He did. I think you have to look at what was going on in culture and everything at that time. And you look at that and you have to say, during that decade, he was the quintessential player and made the most impact on the game in my opinion. So the fact is that, the Cubs won't acknowledge him, I think is travesty. And, I think baseball writers should give him his due, but that's my personal opinion, but absolutely.
Do you think they'll eventually work out that relationship with the Cubs?
I don't know. I hope they do, because I think it's a shame that Cub fans are deprived of having Sammy as part of that wonderful group of players that they're enshrining in the Cub Hall of Fame and bringing out to the park. And, he absolutely should be part of that. And I think the fans are, I think they're the ones that suffer. And I just think, again, you have to look at what else was going on and what everybody else was doing at the time. And, so.
Steve Dunn asks, have you considered writing a book?
No one wants to read a book that I write. So, plus I kind of like to keep my stories. Well, I'm telling a lot of my stories right now. But, I think, they're personal. So I don't feel that a lot of other people would care to hear my stories. And again, I like to keep them for myself. They're my life experiences. So I don't think I would ever write a book.
Sure. In terms of just over time, from when you'd broken into sports, we talk obviously about technology being a significant change, talking about the publications. And by the way, I remember when I got my first job, I was so proud that my big expenditure was getting a subscription to Vineline. I felt like I was so big league at that point in time. But what would be another significant change between when you broke into today?
Social media, and how that impacts the game and how you as a PR person have to respond. I mean, I worked for NBC Universal for 12 years, dealing with, actors and actresses and directors. So, anytime you're dealing with people, celebrity types and, baseball stars and, you're always part of your job is to protect them and to protect the organization. And it was a lot easier to do that when you could control the flow of information. And that was before social media. Social media really has impacted that a lot in how you strategize and you approach issues.
Sounds good. And I think we have John back, if I'm not mistaken.
I'm back. I'm on my
go.
iPad now. For some reason, my computer is restarting.
Oh.
I don't know what happened. So unfortunately for everybody, I've lost my PowerPoint presentation. So you're going to have to just bear with me. I'm so sorry. I had some great stuff coming up. The best stuff was coming up.
Oh, that was like a trip down memory lane for sure.
So
I don't know.
I know you just kind of mentioned it, but life after baseball. It looks like in '06 you resigned from the Cubs. What was it that made you decide you'd had enough baseball, or what happened?
Well, I'll say this. I worked for one of the finest human beings I've ever met, and the best person I think I met in the game was Dusty Baker. And his contract was up after 5 years. Andy McPhail was also leaving the team, who is a mentor of mine. And I'd been there for 24 years, and I just figured it was a good jumping off point. After working with Dusty, I just didn't. And honestly, Dusty, and this is kind of, he's my 18th manager in 24 years in baseball, 18 and 24. Now, there was a handful of people that were like, one game managers, interim, Joel Tabelli, Charlie Fox, throw some old names out that, managed for one day, but 18 and 24. So that really kind of said a lot about how things were going. And, Dusty was 18 and I just felt like I couldn't do 19, couldn't do another one. And since Dusty wasn't coming back and Andy was leaving, it was a good jumping off point. And it was a good time to, figure out what phase 2 would be, my next chapter. Sometimes I look back and I say, oh, what would have been like if I'd stayed? Because I wanted that World Series ring, right? You work in the game long enough, and it's all you want that ring as much as the players in the front office. You do. And I invested 24 years in, and I was like, I don't know how much longer I could keep doing this, because we came so close in 2003, right? We had the champagne in the clubhouse. That was heartbreaking. So I just figured that was a good time for me to kind of move on. And I'm glad I did, because I would have waited another 10 years for a World Series ring. 10 more years. And there were some lean years in between there. So I made the right decision, and I ended up getting another amazing job working for NBC Universal in New York. My office was in 30 Rock. So I go from having an office in Wrigley Field to having an office in 30 Rock. I mean, who gets that lucky? And my first project was to launch Late Night with Jimmy Fallon. And, just, it was a great experience working in Manhattan and living there, and working on some amazing projects with NBC Universal. And, I did that for 12 years until the pandemic.
Yeah, and I saw this great quote that I had in the presentation, but at the point that you were interviewed, I think by somebody from Kellogg about your career, you said, well, I guess I used to get paid to watch baseball games. Now I get paid to watch TV. That sounds like a pretty good career, right?
Right. I mean, who can complain about that? And that's exactly right. I got paid to watch baseball games. And I had one of the best seats in the house, sitting in the press box right in the middle. And at 30 Rock, working on some amazing television programming. I mean, one of my shows was Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. So I actually got to stand on the parade route for the parade. And it's like you're watching this, and something you watched in your home growing up every day, every Thanksgiving. It's in the background, the NBC Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. And I'm just like having one of those moments where I'm like, I'm actually in the middle of the parade right now. How cool is that? And so again, I feel very blessed. I've had amazing career experiences, and I've met amazing people.
Is there one thing or a number of things that may have stood out, at least in terms of your baseball career, that you kind of consider your best memories?
Yeah, I mean, in 1998, that whole season was magical and amazing. And, being there for the first night game at Wrigley Field, even though it technically was the next day, as most people recall, we got rained out, but watching those lights go on, that I'll always remember. Working with a character like Harry Carey was just, he treated me like a daughter. He was just a special guy. And it was an honor to help plan his funeral, which I did at, it was at Holy Name Cathedral. And I was part of the planning team, and we were in spring training, and I organized bringing our group to represent the Cubs. And it was funny because people kept on saying to me, Sharon, you're not emotional. You're not emotional. And I was just like, I said, don't worry. I said, after I finish my job, which is getting all of you guys back to spring training, I'm going to sit in a corner and cry. And I did. But, these are things that that stand out. And the amazing people that you get to meet. I got very few autographed items, and the old Cub press box, if anybody can remember back and seeing that, it had a big catwalk on the back, and it was, it's just kind of like a very old press box. Bob Hope came to visit, and he went to the restroom, and I was not a celebrity kind of person, but I was like, I want an autographed baseball from Bob Hope. So I got a baseball, and I went and I stood outside the bathroom because there was only one bathroom. So it was, unisex. And I got Bob Hope to sign a baseball for me. And I still have that ball. So, it's a lot of great memories. I mean, and there's, over 24 years, there's just so many different, different ownerships, different managers, different general managers. We went to Tokyo. We were like the first team to ever play outside the US at the time. That was in the year 2000. That was amazing. And having to, all the players wanted to go to the Pokemon store, which was a big deal at the time. And, part of my job was to arrange for the players to go to the Pokemon store. So we were the tallest people in there. So, a lot of great experiences and memories from my career there, for sure.
Well, I can tell you, I'll paint the picture of the final slide was, thanks, Sharon. It was a picture of you from Club 400 with your Pannozzo 84 jersey on.
Oh, yeah.
That was the first jersey you'd ever had, from what I understand.
Yep. First time I've
Yeah.
ever had a Cub jersey. And I joked with Stu McVicker. I said, you guys even spelled my name right. I love it.
2 N's, 2 Z's, right?
Yeah, 2 N's, 2 Z's. Yeah, there's the band Styx from Chicago. There's a couple of Pannozzo brothers. Not related to them. They were like, I think 1 N, 2 Z's or something like that. But people were always like, oh, are you related? And apparently there's a whole other Pannozzo group in Kankakee that's in the funeral home business. And people always ask me if I was related to them as well, but I'm not.
So at this point, if you still have time, I was hoping to open it up for questions from anybody. The problem is, now that I'm on my iPad, I don't have the control. So maybe if you just want to unmute yourself and try and be organized, but I don't know how to do it otherwise. Looks like I see Bob Dean raising his hand, so I don't know who else. I can't see everybody at one point, but just hop in and ask Sharon a question.
Hi, John. It's Bob. Sharon, I'm a season ticket holder now for 22 years, and I've just loved going to Wrigley Field. And believe it or not, I grew up with Harry in St. Louis as a kid.
Oh,
And
wow.
it was amazing. But I wanted to ask you, I put it in the chat, what are your best Wrigley Field memories?
Oh, my best Wrigley Field memories. Wow. Well, as a PR person, one of the cool things that I got to do, because I arranged for a camera crew to be able to do this, and it was like the first time we'd ever allowed anybody in the old scoreboard, which was like an amazing experience to climb up into that scoreboard and watch the guys work by hand with everything. I mean, it was just like such a like a throwback in time to be able to be in that scoreboard and have that experience. So that was really cool. And just honestly, it's hard to pinpoint the best experiences because they were all great. I mean, well, obviously today is 9/11, and one of the really emotional experiences with that was when Sammy hit the home run at our first game back after, we took a couple of days off for to recognize 9/11, and Sammy ran around that field holding the American flag. I mean, I still see it in my head when he did that. That's memorable to me. Yeah, so I could go on for a long time, but yes, there's just so many. I mean, and as you know, it's such a special place. I have a hard time going back there now because there's video boards and it's changed so much. It's, I had the privilege of working there probably in the last of the golden age. If we had the old the donut place on the corner, and at one point my office got moved into the donut shop, so that was kind of a joke. They didn't want the media in the front office, so they moved my PR department out to the donut shop, and so that's kind of a running joke, but it was actually, I loved being in the donut shop, so I had no complaints, but it still did smell like donuts.
All right, anybody, that's, again, if you wanna unmute yourself and just pop in and ask a question, go have at it.
Yeah, one other quick question for you, Sharon. Interesting with your history as basically the first lady for the Cubs. Anything on Marla Collins?
Oh, well, Marla was at the event at the 400 Club to celebrate the 1984 team. And, Marla's doing great. She got married, she had a family. Yeah, I mean, and I think she works as some sort of medical technician.
But yeah, that was kind of, so quote unquote crazy to old timers. So I'm thinking your stories with Don Zimmer, and here's a lady Batgirl.
Yep. Well, I think, what was it, after she posed in was it Playboy? Whatever magazine.
One of those.
Yeah, exactly. I think, she was fired by the organization, and she went on to live a great life, right? And it was great seeing her because I haven't seen her in a number of years, but she was at that event hosted by the 400 Club. It was it was really nice of them to acknowledge her and bring her back.
There's a question in the chat. Do you have any stories from Andre Dawson in 1987?
Yeah, not that I can think of off the top of my head. Andre Dawson is one of the nicest human beings. Great family, just such a professional, just a wonderful human being.
Can you explain the relationship between Sosa and Mark Grace? I guess it wasn't too good, was it? Why wasn't it?
No, I don't think that's the case. They're just two different people. Sammy is this larger than life, big personality, and Sammy had the ability that year to really sort of embrace the attention, and honestly, he loved it. I mean, it almost like he could feed off it, and that was part of his charm. And Mark is just a different personality, very reserved, not looking for attention. And so I think actually, in a way, Sammy really helped Mark, because I think Sammy made Mark more comfortable when they were doing interviews, and the attention. And almost it was great too, because Sammy was happy to take the attention, whereas, Mark being just a different person, type of personality. So they were great together. And I think they respected each other a lot and how each of them was, handling things. But Sammy enjoyed every moment of that. He truly did. And loved the attention, and he enjoyed it in a different way. I don't think Mark really enjoyed it. Mark, it was part of his job. And Mark, I do recall, was very quiet and reserved, and he was happy to let Sammy take it, with the attention.
I just wanted to mention that one of your former coworkers is attending the meeting, Mary Kuzmarek. Do you
I
remember
saw
her?
her name pop up. Of course I do.
You do. She's a good friend of mine. Any
Yeah.
stories that you can share?
No, we were
Yes.
not sharing any of
She's
those
just here to
stories.
support you. So yeah.
Oh, well, thank you, Mary. Of course, like I said, there was a time where really we had a very small front office. It's not now. The front office is so big, and we just had a core group of people, and we all knew each other. And you socialized with people in a different way then, and it was just a much more family friendly oriented type of culture.
The good old days. Yeah, I
Yes,
miss the old days.
Yeah.
Yum Yum Donuts. You mentioned the donut shop.
Yeah,
And
Yum
yeah.
Yum Donuts. And I hate to be that, like, sounding like an old person going the good old days, but they were good old days. They were very different. And I talk about this to other colleagues of mine who, former PR people, because, people stayed in these jobs for their whole career. And we all feel like we were fortunate to work at the end of the golden era of what it was like to work in a front office and be part of a baseball team, and because we were part of the team as well. That's how we were treated. It wasn't just the players, but the front office and people who work security and people, you knew who the beer vendors were. I mean, it was a different time. It really was.
I will say, as a former guest in your press box, Sharon, it was always an incredibly fun place to be.
Oh,
It was so easy to work with you and your crew of people, because it was both professional, but you also it was also fun. And I think you're right. I mean, that was really the great golden era. And I agree. I mean, it was a wonderful time. And, just thinking about you telling all these stories of your whole journey through baseball, it was just marvelous, because now there are so many women who are in these positions. And I'm sure that you were a mentor to a lot of them, because there weren't a lot when you started.
right,
So,
right. Well, thank you for saying that about the press box, because,
was
it was our workplace, right? And we tried to, make the best of sometimes not the best, the no air conditioning. Yeah, the food sometimes wasn't the best. But I think we all did our best to try to create a good work environment for everybody and be fair. It was always tough. But thank you for saying that about the work environment, because we
that
did
was
try.
great.
We did try.
Anyone else? It doesn't look like it, Sharon. This has been a blast. I hope it was fun to reminisce a little bit. Hope I didn't embarrass you too much with any of those
Oh
things,
no, I want that PowerPoint though.
but
And I just want to thank everybody for showing up for this. I mean, honestly, it's been a pleasure for me and just a treat just to think about all these things, because you forget about them, right? You think about your day to day, and you don't really get a chance to think about these great stories and the great people. So thank you for letting me reminisce.
it was fun. It was a lot of fun. Great stories, and I'm sure if we had more time, we could probably hear all kinds of other things. But it's it's well after 8:17 here, so it's probably dinner time for you. I'll let you get your dinner and we'll get out of here. But thank you so much for doing this. It was so much
No,
fun.
no, thank you. Thank you guys all for having me and for listening to me.
All right. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Great.
All right,
Thank
well,
you.
go Cubs. Sweep the Dodgers.
Right.
Thank you.
See you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.